Good afternoon, Villa 2. This is Mrs. Hughes, and today we are going to be learning about greatest common factors. And our lesson that we are focusing on is 3-1, and the title is Greatest Common Factor. Now, before we jump into how to find the greatest common factor, I want to talk about vocabulary. And so please set up your vocabulary section. And the vocabulary word I'm going to give you today is greatest common factor. Now you may see this written as GCF throughout the math book as we move forward here. So what is the greatest common factor, or the GCF? Basically what this is, it's when you have a set of two or more numbers two or more numbers. The GCF is the largest factor that all of the numbers in the set have in common. So basically we're looking for the greatest common factor, exactly like the word says. So how do we find this greatest common factor that we're talking about? There are a couple of different ways that we can find this. I'm going to give you two examples today. The first example, so let's set up our examples portion of our notes. And we're going to start with example A. So let's say we were given two numbers and we want to find the greatest common factor, GCF, of the numbers 24 and 36. The first way I'm going to teach you to do this is through prime factorization. And we just learned about this in our last video. So when we're using prime factorization to find the greatest common factor, the first step you are going to take, step 1, is to find the prime numbers. Of each of our numbers. So I'm going to take 24, and I'm going to do both ways. I'm going to do the cake way and then the tree way. So I'm going to start with 24, and I'm going to make my division symbol on top of that. I ask myself, what prime number can I multiply to get 24 or divide into 24? Well, I know 2 times 12 will give me 24, so 2 goes into 24 12 times. 12 is not a prime number, so I need to divide it again. And I know 2 will also go into 12. 2 goes into 12 6 times. 6 is not a prime number, so I divide it again. And I know 2 will also go into 6. So 2 goes into 6 3 times. 3 is a prime number, so I have found all of my prime numbers for 24. I now need to write this in an equation right underneath this. So I would say the prime numbers for 24 equal, and remember we circle as we go, 2, that's 1, 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. And there I have my prime numbers for 24. Now I have to do the same thing with 36, and I said I would do both methods, so I'm going to do the tree method over here, just to kind of refresh our memory. So I put 36 at the top of my tree, and I pull out some branches. And I ask myself, what two numbers can I multiply to get 36? Well, I know 3 can go into 36 12 times. 3 is prime, so I make a branch off of 12 because that is composite and has more factors. And I can say 3 times 4 will give me 12. 3 is prime, so I build off of 4, which is composite. And I know that 2 times 2 will give me 4. 2 is prime, so I now have all my prime numbers complete, and I'm ready to write my equation. So I would say that 36 equals, and remember these are in sequential order, so I start with my smallest prime number first, 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. And there I have all my prime numbers for 36. Now I'm ready to move on. I've found my prime numbers. I can now find out what my GCF is between 24 and 36. So step 2, you are going to look for common factors. And what I mean by this is the numbers need to be the same in both lists. So I would take my first equation, which is 24 equals 2 times 2 times 2 times 3, and then I'll take my second equation, 36 equals 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. And now I'm going to only box the numbers that are the same in both equations. So in both equations I have 1, 2. In both equations I have 2 2's. When I come to my next factors, I see a 2 and a 3. These are not the same, so I'm not going to box them. But 3 and 3 are, so I'm going to box these. So now I have 3 factors that are in common between my two numbers. I have one more step before I can actually find out my greatest common factor. Okay, step 3. You are going to find the product. Remember, product is the answer to a multiplication equation. The product of the common factors. So if I look back on my previous page, I would see that we had 2 in common, and then we also had another 2 in common, and then we had the 3 in common. So I get the equation 2 times 2 times 3 equals, and whatever it equals is going to be my greatest common factor. So 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 3 is 12. Therefore, our solution is the GCF of 24 and 36 is 12. Okay, I said I would show you 2 ways to find the greatest common factor. So next is going to be example B. And for example B, we are going to look to find the GCF, greatest common factor, of 24 and 40. And what I like to call this method is the rainbow method. And you'll see why I like to call that this in just a second. So step 1, when we are doing the rainbow method, is you want to list all the factors for each of your numbers. So if I were to do this for 24, I would start off with 24 here, and then I put little colons so I know that the numbers that come after are going to be factors. And I'm going to begin, and I'm going to think to myself, well, 1 times 24 will give me 24. And I create this little jump between these two. And then I ask myself, can 2 multiply to 24? Yes. 2 times 12 will give me 24. And I create another little jump. Next, I ask myself if 3 can go into 24, and yes, it can. 3 times 8 will give me 24. And I create another little jump. And then 4. 4 times 6 gives me 24. And so as you can see, I've created this rainbow-like picture. And now I found all my factors of 24. 7 isn't going to go into 24, so I don't need to include it. Now I'm going to do the same thing to 40. I'm going to place 40, going to place the colons, and I'm going to begin. 1 times 40 gives me 40. And I'm going to do my rainbow upside down this time. And I'm going to get a jump like this. And I know 2 times 20 can go into 40. And I create another little jump like this. I ask myself if 3 can go into 40. It can't, so I move on. 4 times 10 will give me 40. And I create another little jump right here. And I move on to 5, and I ask myself 5 times what will give me 40. 5 times 8 gives me 40, and I create another jump. And I just check the only number I'm missing here is 9, but 9 won't go into 40, so it's not a factor. I now have all my factors for 24 and 40 in this rainbow method. Once you have all your factors, you're ready to go on to step 2. And what you want to do in step 2 is list the common factors. And you want to list all of them that you see in your factors up here. So I'm going to circle them as I see them. I see that 1 is in common between these two. I see 2 is in common. 3 doesn't have a partner, but 4 does. Come here and I'm going to circle 4. 6 and 5 are alone. 8 is in common. 12, no match. 10, 24, no other matches. So my list would be 1, 2, 4, and 8. Those are the common factors between these two numbers. Now that I have them listed, I'm ready to solve my problem. Step 3. You're going to choose the greatest number, the greatest factor. And in this case, the largest factor that they have in common is 8. So 8 is our solution. The GCF is 8. And that's how you use the rainbow method to find the greatest common factor. I would like you to go ahead and click on the link above this video to practice finding the GCF a couple of times. And when you're finished, you're done with your math homework. I will see you all tomorrow, and I hope you have a great evening.